Okay, so welcome back to this next video in which we are discussing amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. Okay, right, so we're currently in the process of looking at the corticospinal and corticobulbar tracts, okay, because in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, not only are the motor neurons, which are located in the spinal cord and in the cranial nerve nuclei, going to degenerate, but also the BET cells, or the giant pyramidal cells, which have their cell bodies up in the primary motor cortex, but which send their axons down through the corticospinal or corticobulbar tracts to the motor neurons. Those are also going to degenerate. And I'd just like to give you a little bit of terminology that I have sort of been withholding from you up until now, but I'm continuously almost saying it, so I want to now give it. Okay, so there is common terminology that is used all the time. So, the motor neurons, the real motor neurons that are actually in the spinal cord or the cranial nerve nuclei, those are called, all the time in neurology, lower motor neurons, okay, or LMNs for short. Okay, the BET cells, or the giant pyramidal cells, which are the cells which innervate the lower motor neurons, which are the real motor neurons, are not actually motor neurons. So the BET cells aren't really motor neurons, but they are referred to as motor neurons, and they are called the upper motor neurons. Okay, the reason I've been withholding this terminology is because the BET cells, or the pyramidal cells, are not really motor neurons. They do not innervate skeletal muscle. Okay, the lower motor neurons are the real motor neurons. Okay, but this is common terminology that you'll hear all the time in neurology. Okay, so it's important to know, and I keep almost saying it when I'm talking about the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and the corticospinal tract, so I think we need this terminology. Okay, so in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis then, both the upper motor neurons, which are the BET cells, or the giant pyramidal cells, are going to degenerate, and the lower motor neurons, which are the real motor neurons in the spinal cord or the cranial nerve nuclei, they are also going to degenerate. So it's a disease of both upper and lower motor neurons. Okay, right. So let's now continue on with the corticospinal tract. So we're throwing aside the corticobulbar tract for now, and we're going to concentrate purely on the corticospinal tract. Up until now, they've been following the exact same course, but now is where they're going to diverge. Okay, so we're going to start with the corticospinal tract, and we'll come back to the corticobulbar tract. So we're going to see how it's going to progress its way down the brainstem. So we've seen so far that the axons of the upper motor neurons have come down from the cerebral cortex, from the primary motor cortex. They've gone into the subcortical white matter, and now they've entered through the internal capsule. So they've gone into the internal capsule, and they've gone through this gap between the putamen and the caudate nucleus. They've then gone from the internal capsule into the crus cerebri of the midbrain on their side. So we're showing all of this for the left-hand side, but of course it will also be happening on the right-hand side. Okay, now these axons then are going to come into the middle 1/3 of the crus cerebri, and then they're going to descend down into the pons. And now we're going to show this in more detail. So we're going to draw a picture that we have not drawn before, which is we're going to draw the brainstem from the ventral view. Okay, so we're going to look at the brainstem from the front now. Okay, so let me draw this on this next page. So firstly, let's start by drawing the midbrain. Okay, so when we draw the midbrain from the front, remember it's got this Mickey Mouse shape. So here is the right cerebral peduncle now. Okay, even though it's on our left-hand side, it's the patient's right-hand cerebral peduncle, and here then is the left cerebral peduncle here. Okay, and then of course the midbrain will progress back like so, and then you'll have the superior colliculi right at the back there. Okay, so that's the midbrain. Okay, then below the midbrain you've got the start of the pons here. Okay, which will go down like so, and it will end here. And then below the pons you've then got the medulla. Okay, and then we'll end the medulla here. Right, okay, so at the moment then, where is the corticospinal tract? It is in the crus cerebri. So here are the crus cerebri, marked out now here. They're the most ventral portion of the cerebral peduncle. And specifically, both the corticospinal and corticobulbar tracts were running in the middle 1/3 of the crus cerebri. Okay, which I'll demarcate here. Okay, so let's colour that in. So here in green, these are the axons of the corticospinal and corticobulbar tracts. Okay, so they are the axons of the upper motor neurons that have come down from the primary motor cortex. Okay, and they're descending through this first ventral portion of the crus cerebri in the middle 1/3. Okay, right. So now is the point where the corticospinal and the corticobulbar tracts are going to diverge. Okay, so through the midbrain it's the same. Now we're just going to focus on the corticospinal tract. Okay, so now what's going to happen is these axons of the corticospinal tract are going to continue on through the pons. Now they're not going to be visible from the exterior of the pons, they're going to be deep within the pons. So what I'll do is I'll draw this in dashed lines here. Okay, they're going to descend through the pons like so. And this is the path they'll follow, but it's not going to be visible from the external aspect of the pons. Okay, which is why I'm showing it in dashed lines. Okay, I'll draw a section of the pons in a moment, and then we'll be able to see this tract running through the middle. Okay, so here they are in green, and I'll dash the colouring in as well. Okay, like so. So this is not visible from the external aspect. Right, now the left corticospinal tract and the right corticospinal tract are still, at this point, completely separate, okay? So the fibres in this left portion are not mixing with the fibres in the right portion. So these fibres here have come from the left cerebral cortex, and the fibres in this one here have come from the right cerebral cortex. And they haven't mixed at all at the moment. Okay, right. Then what's going to happen is they're going to then run down along the medulla, and they're going to be on the ventral aspect of the medulla. Now, bizarrely here, they actually are visible. They're on the external aspect of the medulla. So if you look at the medulla from the front, you see these two large bulges on the front, and these bulges that run all the way down the medulla, these are the corticospinal tracts, which are visible, basically. Here is the right corticospinal tract, and here is the left corticospinal tract. Okay, right. Now they have another name. These projections on the front of the medulla are also known as the pyramids. Okay, so you've got the left pyramid, which is the one that I've pointed to, and you've also got the right pyramid. Okay, and it's for this reason that the corticospinal tract is sometimes also known as the pyramidal tract, okay? Not only because you've got the pyramidal cells up in the cerebral cortex, but because of these pyramids that are the corticospinal tract running through the medulla. Okay, other landmarks of the medulla are the inferior olives, okay, which sit alongside the pyramids here. Okay, so here we have the left inferior olive, or you can also call it the inferior olivary nucleus, but most people would just call it the inferior olive. Okay, and it's just called that because it looks like an olive. Okay, right. So here, I'll colour it in vivid purple. This is another structure that you can see when you look at the medulla from the front. It's the inferior olive. Okay, right. So that's the medulla seen from the front. Okay, so this is the path that these corticospinal neurons are following. Now, at the moment, they have not crossed at all. Okay, now this is the point where we need to discuss the fact that they are going to cross, however. Okay, so basically, it is the case that the movement of all the muscles on the right-hand side of your body is controlled by the primary motor cortex on the left-hand side of your brain. Okay, so let me show this. So, all the muscles on the right half of your body, here in pink, are controlled by the left half of your brain, here in blue. Okay, so the motor neurons that innervate the muscles on the left side of your body are going to be controlled by upper motor neurons that have had their cell bodies in the left primary motor cortex, okay, and are therefore descending at the moment in the left corticospinal tract. So at some point this needs to cross onto the other side so that these axons can synapse with lower motor neurons on the right hand side, and then those lower motor neurons will then go and innervate muscles on the right hand side of the body. Meanwhile, the muscles on the left hand side of your body, here in turquoise, the lower motor neurons will also be on the left hand side of the body, but the upper motor neurons that innervate those lower motor neurons, they will have their cell bodies up on the right hand primary motor cortex. Okay, so at some point the right corticospinal tract is going to have to cross to innervate lower motor neurons which are on the left hand side of your body. Okay, and we're going to see that in a moment, but before we do, I'd just like to show you some sections. Okay, so what I want to now do is take a transverse section through the pons, so cut it transversely like so, and show you where the corticospinal tract is sitting within the pons. Okay, so I'll put this alongside here. Okay, so if you take a transverse section of the pons, it ends up looking something like this. Okay, here is the front portion of the pons that we are seeing here. So this is the front of the pons, and this is the back portion of the pons, and these two sort of structures coming out from the back, these are peduncles going into the cerebellum. Okay, so these are connections between the pons and the cerebellum, which remember is sitting behind the pons. Okay, so these are specifically the middle cerebellar peduncles, and they contain loads of axons that are going from the pons into the cerebellum. Okay, and we're going to see other cerebellar peduncles. We will also see the inferior cerebellar peduncles at the very least. I don't think we're going to ever see the superior cerebellar peduncles, but they're just above the middle cerebellar peduncles. Okay, right. So this is the pons here. So you've got a left middle cerebellar peduncle and a right middle cerebellar peduncle shown here. And then quite close to the front of the pons here, you will have the corticospinal tracts running down here. Okay, so they're not visible from the external aspect, but you know, they're quite far forward in the pons. Okay, now let's also take a cross-section of the medulla and see where the corticospinal tracts are in the medulla. Well, we don't really need to do this because we can see them from the front, but we will do it anyway because it will help us later on when we come to discuss the cranial nerve nuclei. Okay, right. The medulla then. So here, firstly, this structure that I'm drawing here, this is the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay, and you've got two of them. You've got the left inferior cerebellar peduncle and the right inferior cerebellar peduncle. Then the medulla will go forward like so. Okay, and then at the front it's got the two pyramids here. Okay, right, so let's put on the major structures then. So, firstly, the one that we're really concerned with, right at the front here, you have got the two pyramids. Okay, the left pyramid here and the right pyramid here, which are the left corticospinal tract and the right corticospinal tract. This is just a bundle of axons running in parallel down the medulla, basically. Okay, then behind that, you've then got the two olives. Okay, so here is the right inferior olive, and here is the left olive. Okay, the left inferior olive. There is also a superior olive, which we're not going to see in this video. Okay, then at the back of the medulla, you've then got the ending of the fourth ventricle. So remember I said the fourth ventricle is this structure sitting behind the pons and the medulla. Okay, this space here, which will be between the pons and the cerebellum, which will be behind, this is the fourth ventricle here. Okay, and then it continues on down in the medulla here. Okay, where you've also got a little bit of the fourth ventricle. Okay, and then these two structures on either side, this one here and this one here, these are the inferior cerebellar peduncles, which are also going into the cerebellum. Okay, so inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay, right. So that then shows the corticospinal tract descending through the brainstem. Okay, what we now want to see is the motor decussation, okay, because now at the junction between the medulla and the spinal cord below, you are going to get a crossing over of the corticospinal tracts so that the upper motor neurons on each side can innervate lower motor neurons on the opposite side. Okay, so you're going to have the motor decussation, as it's called, or even more grandly, some people will call it the major motor decussation. Okay, right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a transverse section through the spinal cord below, and I'm going to show you where these corticospinal fibers are going to end up. Okay, so I'm taking a transverse section of the cervical spinal cord here. Okay, so the portion of the spinal cord just underneath the medulla, basically. Okay, so I'll just show you a few of the little structures of the spinal cord here. Okay, right, so we've taken a transverse section of the spinal cord. The spinal cord is a nice oval shape. Okay, let's put on a few of the features of the spinal cord. At the front here, we have the anterior median fissure. Okay, anterior median, which is another name for middle. Okay, and then fissure. Okay, so that's that little crack that runs all the way down the spinal cord on the front. Okay, then at the back you've got a sulcus. Okay, a little crack here, but it's not actually open in the way this one is. This one is actually open, whereas this one is the same sort of thing, but it's sort of the two sides of it have come together, so it's closed basically. And this is called the posterior. Okay, because it's at the back of the spinal cord. And I should have said that this is the front of the spinal cord, so this is the side that we'd see if we were looking for on the ventral aspect. And this is the back of the spinal cord, the side we wouldn't be seeing if we were looking from the ventral aspect. Okay, so this is the posterior median sulcus. Okay, right. Now, other landmarks then are the structure of the grey matter. Okay, so the spinal cord consists of white matter and grey matter. Okay, the white matter consists of axons, the grey matter consists of cell bodies, and the grey matter is arranged in this sort of butterfly-like shape, like so. Okay, and you've got in this the dorsal horn here, the dorsal grey matter horn. Okay, so this is called the dorsal horn of the grey matter of the spinal cord, and then you've also got this ventral horn here, and of course you've got that bilaterally, so you've got a left ventral horn and a right ventral horn, a left dorsal horn and a right dorsal horn as well. Okay, right, so now that's what the cervical spinal cord looks like. Now what I want to show is where the fibers are going to go, basically. So we'll start off with the right corticospinal tract here, which is currently on the right hand side, but which is now going to move onto the left hand side. Okay, right. So the first thing that I should say is not all of the fibers actually move at the major motor decussation. Some of them are going to move at the level where they're actually going to synapse with lower motor neurons, and we'll come on to that later on. Okay, so approximately 10% of them are going to stay on the same side, okay, like so, and they're going to go into what's known as the anterior corticospinal tract here. Okay, so I'll come back to that. That's about 10% of the axons in the corticospinal tract are going to stay on the same side, so they haven't really moved at all. They've stayed in exactly the same position. The other 90% are going to cross over to the other side, and they're going to go into this lateral white matter column over here. So much more are going to do that. Okay, 90%. And I should have actually just told you about the white matter columns of the spinal cord. I didn't do that. Okay, so you've got 3 different white matter columns of the spinal cord. These ones back here, which we're not going to talk about at all, okay, these are known as the dorsal columns. So you've got a left dorsal column and a right dorsal column. Okay, then further forward, if we divide down here, you've got the anterior columns here. This is the right anterior column, and this is the left anterior column here. So these are the anterior columns. So these 10% that are staying on the same side stay in the anterior column. Okay, and then finally the other columns are the lateral columns. Okay, so this is the right lateral column here. You've also got the left lateral column. Okay, so there are these three white matter columns of the spinal cord. So the 10% that stay on the same side, they stay in the anterior column. The 90% that cross to the other side, they go into the opposite, the contralateral as it's called, which just means the opposite lateral column. Okay, and then the same thing will happen for the left corticospinal tract. So 10% will stay in the anterior column, okay, and then about 90% will go into the contralateral, i.e. the right, in this case, lateral column. Okay, right. So these portions here that stay on the same side, these are known as the anterior corticospinal tracts. Okay, and of course you have a right anterior corticospinal tract and a left anterior corticospinal tract. Okay, so this is the anterior corticospinal tract. Okay, then the ones in the lateral columns are called the lateral corticospinal tract.